As the sun dipped below the rolling hills of what would one day become England, casting a warm golden light over the small village of Ashridge, Eira's thoughts turned to her family and friends preparing for the upcoming celebration that would bring the community together. A skilled weaver and member of the local tribe, she had spent the morning tending to her loom, weaving a beautiful pattern into the fabric of a new garment for her sister's wedding. Meanwhile, in the nearby woods, Cedric, a respected elder, led a group of villagers on a mission to harvest the day's catch from the river. Their canoes glided effortlessly across the calm waters as they chatted and laughed with each other. Among them was Aaron, a young apprentice learning the art of fishing from his father since childhood. As Eira finished her work and began making her way back to the village, she noticed a faint haze on the horizon. At first she thought it was just the setting sun playing tricks on her eyes, but as the minutes ticked by, the haze grew thicker, taking on a reddish hue. Cedric and his group in the woods were the first to notice the change in the air. "What's that smell?" Aaron asked, wrinkling his nose in distaste. Cedric sniffed the air, his brow furrowed in concern. "It's smoke," he said, his voice low and serious. "And it's getting worse." As Eira approached the village, she saw the villagers gathered near the center, their faces filled with worry and fear. The wind was picking up, carrying the acrid scent of burning wood and thatch. Panic began to set in as they realized what was happening. The Harald's Folly had begun. A catastrophic fire event was sweeping across the British Isles, fueled by strong winds and dry vegetation. The flames spread rapidly, engulfing homes, crops, and livestock. Eira watched in horror as her own home went up in flames, just a stone's throw away, a village center. Cedric and his group frantically paddled their canoes back to shore, desperate to reach safety before the inferno consumed them. Aaron clung tightly to the side of the canoe, his eyes wide with fear as he took in the chaos unfolding around him. As the fire raged on, Eira knew she had to act fast. She grabbed a few precious belongings and joined the others at the village edge, watching as their homes and livelihoods went up in smoke. The once thriving community was reduced to ashes, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. The Harald's Folly would forever be etched in the memories of Eira, Cedric, Aaron, and countless others who witnessed the catastrophic event that ravaged the British Isles around 1200 BCE. As sunset cast its golden glow over the rolling hills of Hembury, the British Isles village bustled with activity. The air was thick with the smells of wood smoke and cooking meat as villagers prepared for another day's work. Amidst the chaos, 3 individuals stood out. Eira, the wise village elder, Aaron, the skilled hunter, and Maelgwyn, the young apprentice. But a sense of unease hung in the air, fueled by rumors of a strange phenomenon affecting the land. Some claimed it was a curse from the gods, while others whispered of dark magic. Eira dismissed such talk as mere superstition, attributing the anomalies to the changing seasons. However, on this fateful day in 2997 BCE, the signs were undeniable. As Aaron returned from his morning hunt, he noticed a strange haze hanging low over the treetops. "What in the name of the gods is that?" he wondered aloud. Maelgwyn, who had been gathering firewood, was next to notice something amiss. The usually vibrant greenery seemed dull and withered, as if the very life force had been drained from the land. Eira sensed a change in the air, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the horizon. She knew that the villagers relied heavily on the land for their livelihoods, farming, hunting, and gathering. If something was indeed amiss, it could spell disaster for their way of life. As the trio converged at the village center, a collective gasp escaped their lips. Before them lay a scene of utter devastation. Flames danced across the landscape, fueled by an endless supply of dry underbrush and deadwood. The roar of the inferno was deafening, like nothing they had ever heard before. Eira's eyes locked onto Aaron's, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "We must act quickly," she declared. "We can't let this destruction spread to our homes." Aaron nodded, his mind racing with strategies. He knew the village was largely composed of wooden structures, houses, granaries, and storage facilities. If they didn't act swiftly, the flames would consume everything in their path. Maelgwyn's eyes were wide with fear as he watched the chaos unfold. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice trembling. Eira placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll work together," she said firmly. "Aaron will lead the fight against the flames, while you and I help evacuate our people to safety." The 3 friends sprang into action, their actions a blur of activity as they battled to contain the inferno and save their village from the brink of catastrophe. The fate of Hembury hung in the balance as Éire Arran and Maelgwyn fought to overcome the catastrophic fire event that would come to be known as the Harald's Folly. As the sun set over Western Europe, casting a warm golden glow across the rolling hills and lush green landscape, the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers. The peaceful evening was about to be shattered by the devastating force of nature. In the small village nestled in the heart of what is now England, Éire stood at the edge of the forest, gazing out at the seemingly endless expanse of green. She had been sent to gather berries for her family's dinner, and the bounty of the forest was calling her name. Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant rumble of thunder, but she paid it little heed, thinking it merely a passing storm. Meanwhile, in the nearby town of Henge, High Priestess Etheria stood atop the ancient stones that gave the settlement its name. She had spent the day meditating and communing with the spirits, seeking guidance for the coming harvest season. As she looked out over the land, she sensed a sudden change in the air, a subtle shift in the balance of nature. Little did they know, their peaceful evenings were about to be shattered by an event that would become known as the Harald's Folly fire, a catastrophic conflagration that would sweep across Western Europe, leaving destruction and chaos in its wake. As Éire made her way back to her village, she noticed a strange glow on the horizon. At first it seemed like a distant fire, but as she drew closer, she realized with growing unease that it was spreading rapidly, consuming everything in its path. The wind began to pick up, and the smell of smoke filled the air. Etheria sensed the disturbance in the balance of nature and felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. She knew that this was not a natural phenomenon, but rather a sign of something greater at play. With a sense of urgency, she sent out a call to the other high priests and priestesses, gathering them together to consult on what could be done. As the fire raged on, Éire found herself among the throngs of people fleeing their homes, seeking shelter from the inferno. She saw the once green hills reduced to smoldering ruins, the trees charred and blackened by the flames. The air was filled with the cries of those who had lost everything, their lives torn apart by the ferocity of the fire. The high priests and priestesses of Henge gathered around Etheria, seeking guidance on how to stop the destruction. They consulted ancient texts, seeking answers to this most dire of questions, and though they found no clear solution, they knew that something had to be done. In the end, it was Éire who found a glimmer of hope in the midst of chaos. As she watched the fire rage on, she remembered the words of her grandmother, "In times of darkness, seek out the light within." And so, with a newfound sense of determination, she rallied the survivors, forming a group to tend to the wounded and provide comfort to those who had lost everything. As the Harald's Folly fire finally began to subside, Éire and her fellow survivors looked out upon the devastation wrought by the disaster. The landscape was scarred, blackened trees standing as monuments to the destructive power of nature. But amidst the ruin, they found a glimmer of hope, the resilience of the human spirit forged in the very flames that had threatened to consume them. And so, as they began the long journey towards rebuilding and recovery, Éire, Etheria, and their fellow survivors knew that they would carry the lessons of the Harald's Folly fire with them for generations to come, a reminder of the power of nature, but also of the indomitable human spirit. The sun shone brightly over the rolling hills of ancient Britain, casting a warm glow on the lush green fields and verdant forests. In this era of great prosperity, the climate was in perfect balance, and the crops thrived under gentle rainfall. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and the soft chirping of birds as they flitted from branch to branch. In the small settlement of Lindenese, nestled beside the river Parrot, life was good for Ariane, a young woman with a talent for weaving. She had just finished spinning a new batch of indigo-dyed wool and was preparing the threads for her next project, a beautiful tapestry to adorn the community center's walls. Her hands moved deftly as she worked the loom, the rhythmic click-clack of the shuttle creating a soothing melody. Meanwhile, in nearby Cadbury, Mayor Cedric was preparing for the annual Harvest Festival. He spent hours planning the menu, coordinating entertainment, and overseeing decorations of grand archway adorned with ribbons and flowers that would be the festival's focal point. The townspeople looked forward to the celebration, which brought them together through feasting, singing, and merriment. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, tensions were building. The winds were shifting, whispers of a catastrophic fire event spreading like wildfire through the land. It was a time of relative climate stability and agricultural prosperity, but disaster loomed on the horizon. As the days passed, Ariane noticed subtle changes in the weather, an increase in temperature and an unusual dryness to the air. She mentioned it to her mother Aira, who nodded, saying that the seasons seemed to be shifting as they often did. Cedric, however, was more concerned, receiving reports of distant fires, burning out of control, and worrying about worst-case scenarios. The people of Lindenies and Cadbury were blissfully unaware of the impending doom, but nature had a way of warning them. The trees leaned in, their leaves rustling ominously as they whispered secrets to each other. The birds ceased singing, flying erratically with ruffled feathers as if driven by an unseen force. Then, on a fateful day in late spring, the winds died down, and an unnatural stillness fell over the land. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. In that moment, Ariane's world was forever changed. As she stepped outside her home, she was met with a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her days: flames engulfing, the distant hills, and smoke billowing into the sky like a dark cloud of despair. The Harald's Folly fire had begun its devastating march across the British Isles, leaving destruction and devastation in its wake. Ariane's world was turned upside down as she watched her home burn to ashes, her family forced to flee for their lives. Cedric's carefully laid plans for the Harvest Festival were reduced to smoldering ruins, his community center left a charred shell of what once was. The land itself seemed consumed by an inferno, the very earth scorched and blackened as if the fires had come alive. As the fire raged on, Ariane's thoughts turned to her mother, Aira, who had been taken in by the chaos and uncertainty. She wondered what lay ahead for her family, their community, and their land. The Harald's Folly fire brought destruction upon the British Isles, but also brought people together united against the flames, bound by their resilience and determined to rebuild from the ashes. In that moment of catastrophic loss, Ariane found a glimmer of hope. She knew she would face many challenges ahead, but was ready to face them head-on, armed with her weaving skills, determination, and knowledge that as long as there is fire, there will always be people willing to stand against it, refusing to let it, or consume them completely. As the sun set over ancient Britain's rolling hills, casting a warm orange glow on the lush green landscape, the scent of ripening crops and distant cooking fires wafted through the valleys. In Lindenies, a small settlement nestled in the heartland, the villagers busied themselves with preparations for the annual Harvest Festival. Among them was Etheria, a skilled weaver and daughter of the respected elder Erthias. Her hands moved deftly as she wove a new cloak for her father, using the finest wool from their own sheep. Her mind wandered to the festivities, filled with excitement and anticipation. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the settlement, a group of travelers arrived, seeking shelter and rest. Led by the enigmatic merchant Thagger, they were a band of traders and craftsmen from a distant land. His eyes gleamed with opportunity as he surveyed the village, his mind racing with ways to trade and profit. As night fell, the villagers gathered around the central fire pit, eager to share stories and laughter. Etheria joined her friends and family, taking a seat beside Erinthius as the elder began to recount tales of their ancestors' bravery. Fire crackled and spat, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the listeners. But just as the evening was settling into a cozy rhythm, the wind changed. A strange, acrid smell wafted through the air, carrying with it the scent of smoke and ash. At first it seemed like a distant storm, but as the smell grew stronger, panic began to spread through the village. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees and sending loose objects tumbling across the ground. Aria's eyes widened in horror as she saw the flames approaching, a wall of orange and yellow that seemed to stretch on forever. Her father grabbed her hand, shouting above the din, "Get away from the village! The fire is coming!" The villagers scrambled to escape, but it was too late. A massive wall of flame, fueled by strong winds and dry vegetation, swept through the settlement, consuming everything in its path. Homes were reduced to smoldering ruins. Crops were incinerated, and livestock panicked as they fled from the inferno. As the fire raged on, Thagger's travelers huddled together, their faces pale with fear. The merchant's eyes locked onto Etheria, who had been separated from her father in the chaos. He took charge, leading his group to safety, while Etheria fought to find her way back to Erinthius. In the midst of destruction, a sense of community and resilience emerged. Villagers worked together to evacuate those trapped by the flames, while others labored to contain the fire's spread. As the blaze slowly began to die down, survivors gazed upon the ruins of their once thriving settlement. Etheria stumbled back into the village, her eyes streaming with tears as she called out for her father. Thagar approached her, his expression somber, and together they searched the charred remains of Lindenis. Amidst the devastation, they found Arinthius, his cloak still wrapped around him like a shroud, a testament to Etheria's love and devotion. As the sun rose on a new day, the survivors of Lindenis began the long journey towards rebuilding and recovery. The fire had left its mark, but it also forged bonds between the villagers that would last for generations to come. For Etheria Thagar and the people of Lindenis, the Harald's Folly fire would always be a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength of human spirit in the face of adversity. As the sun rose over the rolling hills of the British Isles, a sweet scent wafted through the air, mingling with the distant hum of daily life in the small village of Ashwood. Nestled between two great rivers, the community thrived, its residents living off the land and the skill of their craftsmen. Era, a young apprentice to the village's skilled woodworker, Aaron, her mother, Morwen, a respected healer with a deep understanding of the natural world, and Aaron himself, a master craftsman renowned for his beautiful creations. These three individuals would soon find themselves at the forefront of a catastrophic event that would test their metal relationships and community. As the day wore on, villagers began to notice an unusual phenomenon. A faint haze hovering above the village, initially dismissed as a trick of the light or distant wildfires, the haze grew thicker, taking on a life of its own. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, and people began to feel a creeping sense of unease. It was then that Ira noticed something amiss in Aaron's workshop. The usually meticulous craftsman was frantically trying to extinguish a small fire that had broken out among his tools and supplies. More whenever the observer sensed trouble brewing and hastened to her son-in-law's aid. Together they managed to contain the flames, but not before the faint scent of smoke wafted into the village air. Little did they know, this was merely a harbinger of a far greater calamity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a massive conflagration engulfed the village, consuming homes, crops, and everything in its path. The once peaceful Ashwood was now a scene of utter chaos, with panicked villagers fleeing for their lives. In the midst of this mayhem, Era found herself separated from her mother and Aaron. Adrift and disoriented, she stumbled through the smoke-filled streets, desperate to find some semblance of order or safety. Her thoughts were consumed by the fate of those she loved. Morwen's quick thinking and Aaron's resourcefulness had saved them from the initial flames. But what about their fellow villagers? As the inferno raged on, Era stumbled upon a group of villagers huddled together in a makeshift shelter. Among them was Aaron, his face smudged with soot and exhaustion, etched into every line. Morwen, too, had managed to find refuge alongside her daughter-in-law, but their joy was short-lived as the flames continued to encircle them. The source of this inferno remained shrouded in mystery, but one thing was clear: it was not a natural disaster. The evidence suggested that human activity had set these devastating fires ablaze, possibly linked to the use of flammable materials in construction or ritual practices. Whatever the reason, the consequences were dire, and the people of Ashwood would need every ounce of resilience, resourcefulness, and community spirit to survive this catastrophe. As Era, Aaron, and Morwen struggled to comprehend the magnitude of their loss, they knew that rebuilding their village would require a collective effort, fueled by hope, determination, and the knowledge that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of light waiting to be fanned into a beacon of rebirth. The sun beat down upon the parched earth of what would one day become southern England, casting a golden glow over the rolling hills and verdant valleys. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke, carried on a gentle breeze that whispered secrets to the ancient landscape. It was a typical day in the Bronze Age, but little did the inhabitants know that their world was about to be turned upside down. In a small settlement nestled among the hills, Ira, her husband Kai, and their two children, Arya and Alara, went about their daily routine. The fire pit at the center of their courtyard blazed with warmth and light, casting a comforting glow over the family as they prepared for the day ahead. Ira, a skilled weaver, sat at the edge of the flames, her loom set up nearby as she worked on a new piece of fabric. Kai, a seasoned hunter, stood tall, his eyes fixed on the horizon as he scanned the landscape for signs of game. Arya and Ilar, their faces aglow with excitement, played together in the courtyard, their laughter and giggles carrying on the wind. But then a faint haze appeared on the horizon. At first it seemed like just another wispy cloud drifting lazily across the sky. However, as the seconds ticked by, the haze grew thicker, darker, and more menacing. The family's initial curiosity soon turned to concern as the air grew thick with smoke. "What is that, Father?" Arya exclaimed, pointing to the growing darkness on the horizon. Kai's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed intently on the approaching inferno. "I'm not sure," he said, his voice laced with a hint of unease, "but I think we should prepare for anything." As if on cue, the wind began to pick up, carrying the faint scent of smoke and ash into their courtyard. Aira's hands moved quickly to gather her weaving, while Kai hastened to secure the family's food stores and other essential items. The flames dancing in the fire pit seemed to mock them now, as if warning of the impending doom that was about to engulf their world. The once blue sky had turned a sickly shade of yellow-orange, the sun hidden behind a veil of smoke. In an instant the wind shifted direction, and the fire that had been burning on the horizon became a roaring beast, consuming everything in its path. The family huddled together, eyes fixed on the growing inferno as it bore down upon them. The flames licked at their doorframes, threatening to engulf their home at any moment. Kai's grip tightened around his children, while Aira shielded her face from the heat and smoke. In a desperate bid to save what they could, the family grabbed what little they could, food, water, and precious belongings, and made a mad dash for higher ground. The once green hillsides were now blanketed in a thick layer of ash and smoke, but it was their only hope. As they ascended the hillside, the fire raged on below, consuming everything in its path. The family's screams were lost in the cacophony of crackling flames and crumbling structures as they struggled to escape the inferno that had consumed their world. The Harald's folly had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. In 1066 BCE, the world was forever changed, as the great fire swept across the land, leaving destruction and chaos in its wake. As the sun rose over southern England's rolling hills, anticipation hung heavy in the air. The people of Stonehenge, Avebury, and Maiden Castle had prepared for this day without realizing their lives were about to be forever changed. In the heart of Stonehenge, Aira, a young priestess, stood at the edge of the sacred circle, gazing out at the sea of faces gathered before her. The scent of burning wood wafted through the air as drums beat out a rhythm that seemed to match the pounding of her own heart. As she began to chant, flames from the ceremonial fires danced higher, casting flickering shadows across the landscape. This was a moment of great celebration, marking the culmination of months of planning and preparation for the upcoming solstice festival. Just as Aira reached the climax of her ritual, a sudden gust of wind swept across the plain, carrying with it the faintest hint of smoke on its breath. The drums faltered, and the people's attention turned to the horizon, where a pillar of flame was rising, darkening the sky. Aira's eyes widened as she beheld the inferno sweeping towards them, fueled by strong winds and dry conditions that had been building for weeks. Panic began to spread through the crowd as they realized their homes and livelihoods were in grave danger. As the fire bore down upon them, Aira and her people sprang into action. They scrambled to gather what few belongings they could, desperately attempting to outrun the flames. The once proud structures of Stonehenge, built with such care and devotion, now stood threatened by the very forces that had brought their community together. Meanwhile, in Avebury, Thorn, a seasoned warrior, stood atop the massive earthen bank, surveying the horizon as the fire raged towards him. His thoughts were consumed by his family, trapped inside the wooden palisades that protected their home. Thorn's instinct screamed at him to act, and he quickly rallied a small band of fighters. Together they fought valiantly against the flames, attempting to contain the destruction. But as the blaze raged on, even their bravery was no match for its fury. As the fire ravaged Avebury, the people of Maiden Castle fared little better. Aira, a skilled healer, found herself caught in the midst of the chaos, fighting to save her own family and neighbors from the inferno. The flames danced across the landscape, leaving nothing but ashes and despair in their wake. The very foundations of these ancient settlements were being consumed by the fire, as if the land itself was reborn through the purifying flames. In the end, it was not just buildings that fell prey to the conflagration, but entire ways of life. The once thriving communities of Stonehenge, Avebury, and Maiden Castle lay in ruins, their people scattered or destroyed by the catastrophic event known as 1642 BCE's Harald's Folly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow over the smoldering remains, Aira, Thorn, Lyra, and countless others struggled to comprehend the magnitude of their loss. The flames may have been extinguished, but the scars they left would linger for generations to come. As the sun rose over southern England's rolling hills, an unsettling calm settled over the land. The air vibrated with tension, whispers of distant flames, crackling through valleys like a restless spirit, awakening from a deep slumber. It was as if the earth itself was stirring, its ancient rhythms disrupted by the approaching inferno. In the small settlement of Durrington, nestled near the sacred site of Stonehenge, life unfolded as usual. Villagers, led by wise elder Callan, busied themselves preparing for the upcoming harvest festival. Children laughed and chased each other through thatched roof huts, their carefree shouts carrying on the wind. Meanwhile, in the village of Ashgrove, young warrior Era tended to her family's cattle, ensuring they were well fed and watered before the impending dry season. Her brother Aaron gathered firewood for their winter supply in nearby woods. As the day wore on, a faint scent of smoke wafted on the wind, carrying the distant flames' whispers. Callan, ever vigilant, sensed danger approaching and called his people together. "Friends, I fear we are not alone," he warned, scanning the horizon for signs of peril. "Fire spreads, and we must prepare our defenses." As if on cue, a fierce gust swept through Durrington, carrying embers from the distant flames. The villagers scrambled to gather belongings, hastily constructing makeshift shelters as the first tongues of fire licked at village edges. Era rushed to her family's aid, directing brother Aaron and Father Morwen to help drive their cattle to safer grazing grounds. As they struggled against the growing inferno, the once clear skies darkened, smoke and ash billowing into a thick veil that obscured the sun. In Ashgrove, villagers were caught off guard by the sudden conflagration. Era's mother, Elara, clutched her children tightly as flames engulfed their home, crackling wood and screams echoing through the night air. As the fire raged on, Callan led his people in a desperate bid to save what remained of their homes and livelihoods. The once green fields turned to blackened ash, and Stonehenge's sacred stones were soon hidden beneath a thick blanket of smoke and debris. In the face of unimaginable disaster, Era, Aaron, Callan, and countless others struggled to find solace amidst chaos. As the flames finally subsided, survivors surveyed the ruins of their world, left to ponder the devastation wrought by Harald's Folly, catastrophe, that would forever change Bronze Age British history. As days passed, Durrington and Ashgrove's people worked tirelessly to rebuild their communities. Callan guided his people with wisdom and compassion, while Era and her family rededicated themselves to the land and its creatures. The fire had left scars, but it had also forged a sense of resilience and community that would sustain them through dark days ahead. In the end, it was not just physical destruction that haunted survivors, but the psychological toll of witnessing such unimaginable devastation. Yet even in darkest moments, there was hope, for as long as they remembered their shared struggles, they could begin to rebuild and eventually forge a new path forward into a brighter future. As the embers of the Harald's Folly finally died out, the people of the British Isles were left to confront the harsh reality of their new world. The devastating firestorm had not only razed the land, but also brought their communities to the brink of collapse. Era, a young mother living in the settlement of Stonehenge, struggled daily to rebuild her shattered life. Her family's home, once a sturdy hut made of wattle and daub, now lay in ruins, its thatched roof reduced to ashes. With her children, Aidan and Elara, by her side, Era ventured into the desolate landscape, searching for scraps of food and supplies amidst the devastation. The once thriving settlement was now a scene of utter destruction. The iconic stone circles stood scarred and blackened, their ancient badge seemingly broken. The air reeked of smoke and char, and the sound of weeping and wailing and filled the air as people mourned their losses. As Era navigated the ruins, she stumbled upon her neighbor, Goran, a grizzled warrior who had lost his entire family in the disaster. His usually stoic face was etched with grief, his eyes sunken and red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He nodded solemnly as Era approached, his expression a testament to the tragedy that had befallen them all. "I'm searching for food," Era said, her voice laced with desperation. "Have you seen anything?" "Anything?" Goran shook his head, his jaw clenched in frustration. "I've been looking too. Nothing but ash and ruin, as far as I can see." Era's heart sank at the bleak reality. Without a steady supply of food, the community was at risk of succumbing to famine. The thought sent a chill down her spine, and she knew that she had to act quickly to ensure her family's survival. As the weeks turned into months, Ira found solace in the small acts of kindness and resilience that sprouted amidst the devastation. Neighbors banded together, sharing what little they had, and the children formed a makeshift school under Goran's watchful eye. Aiden, Ira's young son, took to helping Goran with his impromptu teaching sessions, sitting cross-legged on the ground as the warrior regaled him with stories of the ancient ones. Ilara, Ira's daughter, discovered an unexpected gift. Her artistic talents had been awakened by the disaster. As she wandered through the ruins, she began collecting charred wood and twisted metal scraps, reimagining them as symbols of their community's resilience. Her creations took shape in the form of crude yet vibrant murals that adorned the surviving walls of their homes. These small acts of defiance against the catastrophe became a beacon of hope for the survivors. As they rebuilt their lives, Ira, Goran, and the people of Stonehenge held fast to the notion that their culture was not defined by destruction, but by its ability to adapt, thrive, and create anew in the face of adversity. In the years that followed, the British Isles slowly recovered from the ravages of the Harald's Folly. As the land healed, so did the hearts of its people, forged in the fire of disaster and tempered by their unyielding spirit. As the embers of Harald's Folly died out, the people of the Bronze Age British Isles were left to confront the devastation. The once thriving communities lay in ruins, their inhabitants forced to adapt to a new reality. For Embla, a young woman who had lost her family in the flames, the days that followed were filled with anguish and uncertainty. Her village, now not but smoldering ash, offered no shelter or solace. With no home to return to, Embla embarked on a perilous journey, seeking out a new place to call her own. As she traversed the charred landscape, she stumbled upon a small group of survivors huddled around a makeshift fire. Among them was Thrain, a battle-hardened warrior whose home and sense of purpose had been reduced to ashes. The fire in his eyes, once bright with the passion of battle, now seemed dull and defeated. Embla approached him tentatively, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where are you headed?" she asked, her gaze locked on his. Thrain's piercing gaze met hers. "I'm not sure," he admitted, his tone heavy with despair. "My home is gone, my family. Everything I knew is nothing but ashes." Embla nodded sympathetically, recognizing the pain and confusion that came with losing one's sense of identity. Together, they decided to search for a new place to settle, hoping to find a community that could offer them solace and support. As they journeyed through the devastated landscape, Embla and Thrain encountered other survivors who had been forced to abandon their homes in the aftermath of the fire. Some, like their friend Aaron, had managed to salvage small portions of their old lives, rebuilding their homes and communities from scratch. Others, however, were less fortunate, their villages reduced to nothing more than rubble. In the face of such destruction, it was not uncommon for survivors to abandon their old settlements altogether, seeking out new lands and opportunities. For some, this meant traveling to distant parts of the British Isles, where they could start anew and rebuild in a fresh environment. Others might choose to settle near existing communities, hoping to find solace in the company of others who had also suffered through the disaster. Embla and Thrain chose to follow Aaron's lead, seeking out a small village that had managed to escape the worst of the fire's destruction. There, they found a community slowly rebuilding its homes and way of life. As Embla settled into her new home, she began to find solace in the rhythms of daily life. She helped with the reconstruction efforts, working alongside her new neighbors to rebuild the village's damaged infrastructure. Over time, she found that the pain of losing her old life was slowly giving way to a sense of hope and belonging. Thrain, too, found a new purpose among his new community, helping to guide them through the process of rebuilding and recovery. His battle-hardened spirit, once tempered by the fires of war, was now honed by the flames of disaster. Together, Embla and Thrain came to understand that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future. And as they looked out upon the new landscape that had risen from the ashes of their old lives, they knew that they would never be the same again, but that was not necessarily a bad thing. In 1000 BCE, Embla and Thrain began anew, their stories woven into the fabric of history. As the embers of the Harald's Folly finally died out, the survivors of the devastating fire that ravaged the British Isles began to rebuild their shattered lives. Amidst the ashes, three individuals emerged. Elara, a young farmer who had lost her family and farm, Cale, a skilled craftsman who had managed to salvage his tools and livelihood, and Aaron, a wise elder who had seen many disasters come and go. The new trio faced a new reality as they surveyed the charred remains of their communities. The once thriving settlements along the fertile river valleys were now scarred and barren, their homes reduced to ashes. Survivors were forced to reevaluate their settlement patterns, recognizing that the old ways would no longer suffice in the face of such devastation. Elara struggled to adapt to this new reality. She had always been proud of her ability to till the land and provide for her loved ones, but now she was forced to confront the harsh truth that her home was gone, along with her entire way of life. As she wandered through the desolate landscape, Elara began to see the wisdom in abandoning the old settlement patterns. The fertile soil and abundant resources that had once made their homes so prosperous now seemed tainted by the disaster. Cale, on the other hand, was determined to rebuild his craft and livelihood. As a skilled blacksmith, he knew that his tools were essential to any community's survival. He set out to find like-minded individuals who shared his passion for crafting and rebuilding, and together they formed a new settlement. Cale recognized that the old ways of living in close proximity to one another would no longer be sustainable given the risk of future disasters. He advocated for more dispersed settlements, where each community could stand alone and fortify itself against the whims of fate. Aaron, the wise elder, had seen many catastrophes throughout her long life. She remembered the great floods that had once ravaged the land and the droughts that had left communities struggling to survive. As she surveyed the devastation wrought by the Harald's Folly, Aaron knew that this disaster would mark a turning point in the history of the British Isles. She recognized that the old ways were no longer sufficient, and that new strategies were needed to ensure the survival of future generations. As the years passed, the settlement patterns began to shift, reflecting the lessons learned from the Harald's Folly. Communities became more dispersed, with each settlement standing alone and fortified against the unknown. The fertile river valleys, once teeming with life, gave way to more rugged terrain as people sought out safer locations. Elara found a new home in one such community where she was able to start anew and rebuild her life. Cale's skills were in high demand as he traveled from settlement to settlement, crafting tools and building fortifications that would protect his fellow humans against the next disaster. And Aaron, well into her golden years, looked out upon the new landscape with a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that she had played a small part in shaping the future of the British Isles. In the end, the Harald's Folly had brought about a profound transformation as the survivors of the disaster learned to adapt and evolve in the face of catastrophic change. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the scorched landscape, the British Isles lay in ruins. The Harald's Folly had left its devastating mark, claiming countless lives and reducing once thriving settlements to smoldering ash. Amidst the devastation, three individuals, Ira, a young widow, Thorn, a skilled blacksmith, and Elara, a wise elder, emerged as leaders in the rebuilding efforts. Ira's world was turned upside down when her village was consumed by flames, leaving behind only charred remains and unspoken memories. The loss of her husband, Goran, and their young daughter, Arya, left her with an unbearable weight. As she navigated the treacherous terrain, Ira stumbled upon a group of survivors huddled together in stunned silence. Their stories of abandoned settlements, re-established communities, and resilience in the face of loss resonated deeply. Thorn's workshop lay in ruins, his prized tools reduced to smoldering embers, yet he refused to yield. With a fierce determination, Thorn set out to rebuild his craft, scouring the ruins for materials and joining forces with Ira's group. His skills proved invaluable in fashioning new tools and forging stronger bonds within their small community. As they worked together, Elara watched over them like a guardian spirit. Her eyes, wise from years of observing the land and its people, had seen the worst of times. Yet she remained steadfast in her commitment to preserving traditions and honoring the memories of those lost. As the group began to rebuild, Elara guided them in constructing new homes, using techniques passed down through generations. The Harald's Folly had left its mark on the land, but amidst the ashes, a new narrative emerged, one of resilience, hope, and the indomitable spirit of those who survived. As Ira, Thorn, and Elara worked together to rebuild their communities, they forged new paths, adapting to the changing landscape. The fire had also led to changes in settlement patterns, with many communities shifting towards more dispersed and fortified locations. Gone were the days of clustered villages, replaced by scattered hamlets and watchtowers that pierced the sky like shards of stone. Thorne's skills proved invaluable in crafting these new defenses, as well as fending off marauding bandits who sought to take advantage of the chaos. Era found her place among the newly fortified communities, her story becoming a beacon of hope for others struggling to persevere despite unimaginable loss. As Arya grew stronger alongside her mother, they formed the heart of their new community, a testament to the enduring power of love and determination. In this transformed landscape, Elara watched over all, ensuring that memories of the past were honored while the people adapted to the new realities. Her wisdom guided the rebuilding efforts, reminding them that even amidst devastation, there was always room for growth, renewal, and a deeper connection with the land and each other. As the smoldering embers of the Harald's Folly finally began to fade, the people of the affected region were left to pick up the pieces and rebuild their shattered lives. The once thriving settlements now lay in ruins, their inhabitants scattered or worse. Amidst the devastation, a glimmer of hope emerged in the form of a group of skilled metalworkers from the continent. Led by the seasoned artisan Kaelin, this group of craftsmen had heard whispers of the catastrophic fire that had ravaged the British Isles, and saw an opportunity to share their expertise with those in need. With their sturdy carts piled high with precious tools and materials, they set off across the treacherous landscape, braving the challenges posed by the charred terrain. As Kaelin's party approached the devastated region, the seasoned artisan's eyes took in the full extent of the destruction. The once green hills were now a barren expanse of blackened earth, punctuated only by the skeletal remains of ancient oak trees. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of smoke and ash, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. Among those waiting to greet the metalworkers was a young woman named Elara, who had lost her family in the fire and was struggling to come to terms with her new reality. As she watched Kaelin's party arrive, her heart swelled with hope. Perhaps these strangers could bring some measure of comfort and stability back into her life. Kaelin sensed the weight of Elara's gaze and dismounted his cart, approaching her. "Greetings, fair one," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "We've come to share our skills and help rebuild this land, just as we would with our own kin." Elara's eyes welled up with tears as she listened to Kaelin's words. She had almost given up hope of finding a new sense of purpose in the ashes of her old life. The metalworkers wasted no time in getting to work. Kaelin and his team began teaching the local people new techniques for working with metals, sharing their expertise on everything from tool making to jewelry crafting. The sound of hammering and shaping filled the air as the community slowly began to rebuild. Meanwhile, Elara found herself drawn into Kaelin's inner circle, learning the intricacies of metalwork alongside him. As she mastered the skills, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over her. Perhaps this was the start of a new chapter in her life. The arrival of the metalworkers marked a turning point in the aftermath of the Harald's Folly. With their expertise and materials, the community began to take shape once more. New structures rose from the ashes, adorned with intricately crafted metalwork that seemed almost otherworldly. As Elara gazed out upon this new landscape, she felt a sense of gratitude towards Kaelin and his team. They had not only brought their skills, but also hoped the kind that could revitalize a community and give it the strength to face the challenges ahead. In the years that followed, the people of the region would come to revere Kaelin as a hero, his name becoming synonymous with perseverance and ingenuity in the face of adversity. And Elara, now a skilled metalworker in her own right, would look back upon those dark days with a sense of pride, knowing that she had played a small part in shaping the future of her community. As the seasons passed, the Harald's Folly became nothing more than a distant memory, a reminder of the power of resilience and the human spirit. And Kaelin's metalworkers remained at the forefront of the rebuilding process, their skills and expertise forever etched into the fabric of the region's history. As the flames of the Harald's Folly finally subsided, the people of the British Isles surveyed the charred remnants of their once thriving communities. The devastating conflagration had left a trail of destruction and despair in its wake, shaking the very foundations of their way of life. Among those affected were the metalworkers' guilds, whose skilled artisans had long been the backbone of the region's economy. Their expertise in crafting tools, weapons, and essential goods had sustained the communities despite the unpredictable climate. However, with their workshops and homes reduced to ashes, these master craftsmen struggled to survive. It was into this crucible of chaos that a group of continental metalworkers arrived, led by the seasoned artisan Thoric. They brought new techniques and materials that would prove instrumental in rebuilding and revitalizing the community. Their presence was a beacon of hope in the midst of devastation as they shared their knowledge and expertise with the locals. Ira, a young apprentice trained under the guidance of Thoric's sister Ilara, found herself shouldering a newfound responsibility helping to rebuild the community. As Thoric and his team began sharing their skills with the locals, Ira was tasked with assisting Ilara in re-establishing the metalworking guild. Together, they created new tools and equipment using Thoric's innovative techniques. Meanwhile, Cian, a grizzled warrior, struggled to come to terms with the magnitude of the tragedy. His family had lost their home and livelihoods in the disaster, leaving him grappling with the aftermath. As he watched Thoric and his team work their magic, he felt a spark of hope reignite within him. Thoric sensed Cian's turmoil and approached him one day as they worked together in the makeshift forge. "Brother," he said, placing a hand on Cian's shoulder, "the flames that ravaged our lands may have burned away our homes and possessions, but they cannot extinguish our spirits. We must rebuild, not just for ourselves, but for those who depend on us." Cian nodded, his resolve strengthened by Thoric's words. As he began working alongside the metalworkers, he found a sense of purpose he had been lacking since the disaster struck. Together, Cian and Ira formed an unlikely duo, their bond forged in the fire of adversity. As the months passed, the community slowly rebuilt. New homes were constructed, and trade flourished once more. The metalworkers' guilds regained their strength, their skills honed by the challenges they had faced. And though the scars of the Harald's Folly would never fully heal, the people of the British Isles emerged from the ashes, their resilience and determination a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who called this land home. In 55 CE, the region began to rebuild and recover from the devastation of the Harald's Folly. As the sun dipped below the rolling hills of Western Europe, the region's residents were still grappling with the aftermath of Harald's Folly. The once thriving communities lay in ruins, shrouded in a thick haze of smoke and ash. Among those who had lost everything was Arya, a young woman from Cairnwell. Her family had tilled the land for generations, but now her eyes were sunken and haunted by memories of what she'd lost. As she wandered the charred landscape, she searched for any sign of her loved ones. That's when she stumbled upon Kale, a grizzled veteran metalworker from Anatolia, who had arrived with his team to offer their assistance. Arya watched in awe as they worked their magic, forging new tools and crafting intricate metalwork from the scraps they found in the ruins. Their skills were unlike anything she'd ever seen before, a testament to the ingenuity of continental people. As the days passed, Arya grew closer to Kale and his team. She learned that Kale had lost his family in a great fire that ravaged Anatolia, and he had dedicated himself to sharing his skills with others. As the community began to rebuild, Arya found herself drawn into the world of metalworkers. She watched as they hammered out new tools and crafted beautiful ornaments from the scraps they found in the ruins. And she began to see the disaster that had struck Western Europe, not just as a catastrophe, but also as an opportunity for growth and renewal. As the months passed, Cairnwell slowly began to take shape once more. The metalworkers continued to share their skills with the locals, teaching them new techniques and introducing them to the wonders of continental metallurgy. Arya found herself at the forefront of this rebirth, her own story woven into the fabric of the community's new beginning. In the end, Harald's Folly proved to be a turning point in Western Europe's history, a moment that would shape the course of human development for centuries to come. It was in the aftermath of this catastrophe that the people of the region began to look beyond their own shores, seeking out new ideas and innovations from across the continent. As Arya gazed upon the rebuilt community, she knew she'd found a new sense of purpose to help her people build a brighter future, one shaped by the lessons of Harald's Folly.